Hello, my name is Jannie Taylor and I'm going to be demonstrating warping the AVL Little Weaver using a method known as front to back warping. Before we even begin to make a warp, we have to have made some decisions about what the project is we're weaving, how long it is, how wide it is, what kind of threads we're using, what colors. So to that end, for this demonstration, I've designed a 24 shaft twill runner, and I'll show you the draft here. There's one more thing we need to consider when winding a warp for the Little Weaver. As you may have noticed on your own Little Weaver, there's a rod connecting the middle of the lower bar of each one of the shafts. The best way to deal with this situation is divide your warp in the middle and wind two separate warp bouts. Alright, now let's get down to winding a warp. For this we will need a few tools. The first thing we'll need, of course, is a warping board. This is used to measure and count the warp. We'll obviously need the yarns we're going to be using for our warp. So I have several spools of A2 cotton here ready to be used. Good to have a pair of scissors on hand. We'll also need some heavy cord for making ties once our warp bouts are made. And the other thing that we'll need we're going to be making two warp bouts, so we'll need two smooth sticks for winding off the warp bouts in a method called a kite stick method. So we'll look at that a little bit later. It's also handy to have, if you have smaller spools of yarn, it's also handy to have a little caddy to hold these upright so they're not rolling around all over the floor while you're winding your warp. Alright, so I think we're ready. We've got our guide, we've got our threads, we've got our warping board, and we're ready to go. So let's get down to it. We have our warping plan, and I'm going to just read through my plan and see what I need to be doing. So I want to be starting off with the light gray, so I've got the light gray on my caddy. I'm just going to put this down on the floor so I can pull straight up off of it. Alright, I'm going to just tie my thread onto the first peg of the threading, where I make my threading cross. Have that attached. I'm going to start out making my warp. So I'll be making a threading cross right in this area, so I'll start off by going over the central peg and down, making my warp. I'm making a 3-yard warp. So that's 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards. Now I've got one thread 3 yards long. I'm going to start back up making the second thread. I'm just going to continue along. Now when I get back up to the top, I'm going to look and see what's happening here. This one was coming over the top, so I want this one to cross from the underneath. It may be different each time we do it as we change the directions of the thread, but for right now, I'm just noticing which way I need to go to make that threading cross lay up right next to each other. So I'm just going to continue along. Laying up the threads right next to each other. I'm not overlapping them or piling them on top of each other. I'm just laying them up one at a time right next to each other on the pegs. So this time I'm going under and then over to make that threading cross. Let's continue along for as many threads as I need. Continuing to do the same thing. Okay, I'm going to continue on doing this and we'll see you in a few minutes. I'm continuing to make my warp. I come to the end of one color and I need to add in another color. Let's cut that one. Tie in the next color. And continue making my warp, continuing to make the threading cross as before and adding in the proper number of the next color. So I'll just continue along making my warp, changing colors as the plan calls for until I've completed this half of the warp. If you happen to have 2 spools of any particular yarn, you can always wind 2 at a time. This saves a considerable amount of time if you can do that. So we can just have the 2 threads. I usually like to keep my finger between them just to keep them from tangling on each other. Then I'm just going to use these as if it were 1 thread. I'll just make a double threading cross. So I'm coming across all the way, winding all the way down, following that same path I was using for a single thread. Back up, and then when I get to the top here, I'm coming over to make that threading cross, and then back over and continuing along. So again, I'm pushing the warp back on the pegs periodically just to keep them lined up, not crowding them together, just letting them lay up side by side. All right. I'll continue along. We'll see you in a while. So you can see as I'm coming along, I'm making a threading cross. I'm keeping the threads in order one at a time. I can pull them apart here and see that they're all in order. Okay, so you can see here that we have all of our threads lined up. We just laid them up as we were putting them on. We laid them up in order right next to each other on the warping board, so they weren't overlapped. So we have all of our threads in place. So the next thing we need to do is give this some ties. We need to make some choke ties, and we need to tie off the threading cross. We went to a good bit of effort to make that threading cross and keep those threads in order. So now we want to make sure that that stays there. So this is where we're going to use our heavy, strong twine. I'll cut some pieces of this. I'll need several. Let's start off with these 3. I'm going to tie off the threading cross, and if you see how the threads are crossing, what I want to do is tie off and isolate that cross. So I'm going to tie off the 4 positions on either side of the threading cross. So I'll just tie around there. Now these don't need to be particularly tight. I just need to be able to isolate that threading cross. So I'm just going to tie them in a bow. But I'm going to tie all 4 positions. I'm just going to reach in, isolate that, tie around it. These will be coming off pretty quickly, so don't need to have them too tight. But right here, I need to make sure I reach in and really isolate that cross. And one more time. So I have all 4 positions tied. Now that we have our warp made and the threading crosses tied, we need to add what are called choke ties. And these keep the warp from shifting in length. So as we put it on, it will go on much more evenly that way. Won't be able to slip around. So I'm going to cut a few more ties. And these need to be very tight. They're called choke ties because that's exactly what they're intended to do, is to really put a tight choke on these. So I wrap it around a couple of times here, pulling it nice and tight and giving it a hard pull and a tight knot. So I'm going to put one about every yard, so since this is a half yard warping board, we'll put one on every other crossing here. So I'm just going to put this on, wrap it around 2 or 3 times, pull it up really tight. That's why this cord needs to be strong. We need to be able to pull on it nice and tight, and then tie that knot one more time. Okay, and just one more time, all the way around, pull it tight. So there we've added the choke ties. All right, we have our warp all made, we have it tied, we have it choked, we're ready to take it off. The method we're going to be using today is called the kite stick method. This is where we're going to take one of our smooth sticks that we talked about, and I'm going to start by pulling off the far end away from our threading cross. We're going to need our threading cross first, so I'm going to start wrapping it at the other end. So I'm going to put this right on my stick. I'm going to make a little lark's head here and put my stick inside that. And now I'm going to be winding it off. And as we take it off, we're winding around, crossing over the front, winding around in the back, crossing back over the front, to the back, over the front, to the back, over the front. And the whole time I'm doing this, I'm keeping this tight. If it starts getting loose, I might add a little bit of a twist to it as I go. I just take it all the way off. I'm making a nice firm package here. Threads that are under tension really can't get into trouble or do anything, get tangled. So we want to keep them firmly under control at all times. So across the front, around the back, across the front again. And I just keep doing that until I've come to the end. When I get to the part where we have our threading cross, I'll just pull that off. And this package is ready to set aside, and we need to wind our other half of our warp. And I'm ready to tie the threading cross, and I thought this would be a good time to review tying that with you so we can get a little close-up of this. I've got my ties. I'm going to be tying the 4 positions on either side of the threading cross. So I'm going to start with these. They're a little easier. These don't need to be tight. These aren't like the choke ties. They just need to be there. And I can tie a bow because I'm going to be removing those shortly. Okay, so I've tied the top and the bottom of this side. Now I'll tie the top and the bottom of this side closest to the peg. And on this side I really want to come in and make sure I'm getting the proper threading cross, that I'm getting the upper and lower sections. Can get a little fussy where I've tied it on, so I'm just going to pay attention here. I'm going to come around and tie the top. And then I'll tie the bottom. All right, I have all 4 positions tied. Now I'm going to go on and tie my choke ties, and then I'll wind this half of the warp off onto my other kite stick. So now the second half of the warp is ready to take to the loom, which is our next step.